Okay, good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Ranch in Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting contact. Tonight I'm going to hit the skin tones again on the central figure. We've got some light, medium, dark, basically flesh tones mixed up, a madder carmine, a pale, fleshy, yellowish tone, and then a burnt cyan or raw umber. I think it's raw umber actually for doing some hair color. All very thin with some linseed oil and some liquid. And yeah, just gonna adjust highlights and start blending out and detailing the facial features. So here we go. Actually, I'll raise that a little bit.
There were certain centers: Rome, Byzantium, Alexandria, Heliopolis in Egypt was a cult site that was maintained for a very long time. If you're interested in this stuff but you don't like to absorb it this way, Flaubert, of all people, the Flaubert of Madame Bovary, wrote an incredible novel called The Temptation of St. Anthony, and in which he describes 2nd century Alexandria in a fictionalized form and gives you a real flavor for the intellectual complexity of the Alexandrian world. You see, Christianity had not yet gelled. It was many things. So you not only have Gnostics of 5 or 6 schools, Simonists, Valentinians, Basilidians, and so forth, but you also have Christians, a number of cults calling themselves Christians, that were also in furious competition: Docetists, Montanists, and later Nestorians. There were gymnosophists from India, people who were actually carrying yogic doctrines into the Mediterranean world. Plus you then have all the surviving cults of the older Egyptian strata, the cults of Isis and Cybele and Adonis and Dionysius, and it just goes on and on. I mean, the richness of this intellectual world is there's nothing comparable in our experience. And it shows the passion with which people were trying to understand the dilemma of a dying world, because this is what they were confronted with. The intellectuals of the empire could feel it all slipping through their hands. And Flaubert gives a wonderful picture of this. I mean, Flaubert has a very romantic streak, and it's like smoking hashish to read this book. I mean, the attention to fabric and architecture and food and odor, and then because the subject matter is the temptation of St. Anthony, it's an excuse to describe these temptations in all their sensual richness and erotic kinkiness, and it's a wonderful way to absorb this material.
But
Yeah.
Someone else raised the point about the elitism or an elite group of people. And if one considers a society as you have in Alexandria, or some of the large centers, well, the only people who really had access to this were people who, first of all, had money. And
Correct.
And who were well educated.
Could read.
And could, yeah.
Yes, you had to be able to read.
They're already kind of an elite group.
That's right. That's right. No, very definitely. What survives from a civilization is its literatures, and these literatures are usually the production of an elite. And we have to remember, don't have any illusions about the Roman Empire. I mean, I always think of the wonderful description, I don't even know why it's there, but Boris Pasternak in Dr. Zhivago goes off on a rip about ancient Rome, and he describes it as a bargain basement on 3 floors. I mean, this was an empire that lived by human cruelty. It was on the backs of slaves that this airy intellectual speculation was based. I mean, it was a tremendously pluralistic society, but that pluralism was maintained by standing armies of enormous size and policies of occupation of enormous cruelty. I mean, because of our relationship to the Christian tradition, we're aware of such things as the Zealot Revolt of 69 and the reign of Herod Antiochus in Jerusalem and so forth and so on. But that was just one little corner of the empire. And in Armenia, in Gaul, in Spain, in North Africa, military governors were carrying out outrageous suppressions of native populations. I mean, it was not a pretty time to be alive. And what comes down to us then is the yearning to escape from that. No wonder these people saw the earth as a cesspool and a trap, because that's what it was for them, without doubt. And our own age is very similar. I mean, we do not have slavery, but we suffer under propaganda, mass manipulation of ideas, and the degradation and exploitation of the third world on a scale the Roman Empire couldn't even dream of. So there is a great affinity. If any of you are interested in this kind of thing, I highly recommend a book by Hans Jonas called The Phenomenon of Life. It's a book of philosophical essays, but there's one essay in there called Gnosticism and the Modern Temper, in which he shows that once you take Gnosticism and dump the angels and the star demons and all the colorful bric-a-brac of late Roman thinking, what you have is a thoroughgoing existentialism, completely compatible with Jean-Paul Sartre, Jean Genet, and the kind of intellectual despair that characterized the post-World War II generation in Europe. Heidegger is thoroughgoingly Gnostic in his intentionality. It's just that the language is modern and stripped of this magical thinking, and by being stripped of magical thinking, in a way, the modern recension of that state of mind is even more hopeless and disempowering. Fortunately, I think we're moving out of the shadow of that, but I'm 44 years old. I grew up reading those people, and it made my adolescence much harder than it needed to be. I mean, my God, there wasn't an iota of hope anywhere to be found, and that's why, for me, psychedelics broke over that intellectual world like a tidal wave of revelation. I mean, I quoted to you last night Jean-Paul Sartre's statement that nature is mute. I mean, this is, now I see this as an obscenity, almost an intellectual crime against reason and intuition. It's the absolute antithesis of the Logos. And much of our world is ruled by men older than I am, who are fully connected into that without any question. And they just think all the rest of this is namby-pamby, ecological soft-heartedness or some sort. There is no openness to the power of bios, to the fact of a living cosmos. This is what Rupert Sheldrake is always trying to say. The reinvestiture of spirit into matter, the rebirth of the world soul, is a necessary concomitant to what we now understand about the real nature of the world. In a way, the theory of evolution, which was born in the 1850s, is the beginning of the turning of the tide. Because even though the first 100 years of evolutionary theory was fantastically concerned to eliminate teleology, eliminate purpose, nevertheless, nobody ever understood that except the hardcore evolutionists. To everybody else, evolution meant ascent to higher form. And I once heard someone say, if it doesn't have to do with genes, it ain't evolution. Well, that's a tremendously limited view of what evolution is. I mean, the inorganic world is evolving. The organic world is evolving, and there the currency is genes. But also the social and intellectual world of human beings is evolving, and there the currency is not genes but memes. So that idea, it carries with it the implication of ascent to higher form, and correctly broadened and understood becomes permission for a return to optimism and to the kind of hope that these folks were trying to articulate.
And it seems to me that mind is, if it is available through trial, then we're back in the separation. Sometimes we don't, or sometimes I do. And this is, to me, a false separation.
Yes, you're right, but it's a separation necessary for philosophical discourse. That's why philosophical discourse is not the top of the mountain. Language itself is the process of making distinctions that are false. This is why all language is a lie. This is why the ultimate truth lies in something unspeakable. But the ascent to the unspeakable is through this kind of philosophical analysis. Let me see, that reminds me of something, but does somebody else have something they want to...
Language is only the vehicle.
Well, it's the vehicle, but eventually there's no road, and you have to park the vehicle and get out and walk, I think. And that's the journey. Plotinus, the great Neoplatonist, has this wonderful phrase. He calls the mystical experience the flight of the alone to the alone. And I love this image. It's so uncompromising, and it's about as true as something can be and still move in the realm of language, because it's saying, finally words fall away, and finally there is only that which cannot be said. Many of you who've stuck with me know that I love to quote this poem by this obscure poet who died in the trenches of France in the First World War, Trumbull Stickney. And he wrote a poem called Meaning's Edge. And the punchline goes like this. Meaning's Edge. I look over meaning's edge and feel the dizziness of the things you have not said. And I think that every one of these weekends, this is the effort to carry you to the edge of an abyss and then push you over into the dizziness of the things unsaid. And they'll always be unsaid. I mean, they are... Wittgenstein, God bless him, had the concept of what he called the unspeakable. He said philosophy operates in the realm of the speakable, but eventually we must confront that which cannot be said, the dizziness of things unsaid. And that's where real authenticity then flows back into the world of community and speech, but it comes from a place of utter silence and unsayability. How could it be otherwise? I mean, what hubris it would be to expect that the small mouth noises of English could encompass being. I mean, that's a primary error that all philosophy chooses to make at the beginning of its enterprise in order to do this set up shop at all. No, these are lower dimensional slices of a reality that is ultimately unitary, ineffable, unspeakable, and dazzling. Anybody else? No? Shall we do more? Yeah, please.
Philosophical discourse is verbal and mental masturbation.
Absolutely. And masturbation, you see, because it is, there's a pun here, but it's autopoetic. It is completely out of yourself. There is no union with the other. And the other is what you're always trying to get to. The other is a common term in these literatures. The other is that which cannot be fully known. You know, I always like to quote the British enzymologist J.B.S. Haldane, who made a wonderful statement. He said, the universe is not only stranger than we suppose, it is stranger than we can suppose. And that's a dizzying perception. It's one thing to think it's very strange. It's quite another thing to realize that it is stranger than you can suppose. You may suppose and suppose and suppose, and you will fall so far short of the mark that it's absurd. That's what it means to be in the presence of a mystery, you see. The modern word mystery translates out to unsolved problem. That's not what a mystery is. A mystery is not an unsolved problem. A mystery is a mystery. And ratiocination can exhaust itself and make no progress with it. And that's what's at the core of our being. And that was what was at the core of this ancient perception. I mean, these were thoroughly modern people. They were shoved up against the same things that tug at our hearts and our minds and our souls. And beyond that, there's not a whole hell of a lot that you can say about it. This is an idea that will not die, but its practitioners, as you say, they end up in footnotes. They do not have a happy fate. Certainly Henri Bergson, with his idea of the élan vital, this is an effort to preserve this idea of the world soul, and yet, you know, the fate of Bergson, his influence on modern society, on modern philosophy is certainly minimal. Alfred North Whitehead is my great favorite. I mean, I think Whitehead is just, you know, the cat's pajamas. And he has this idea of the living cosmos, that life and vitality extend right down into the electron. And yet, in spite of his mathematical contributions, the fact that he wrote Principia Mathematica with Bertrand Russell, Whitehead is not taught. I mean, there's some, I guess, one university in this country where they take him seriously. The modern philosophy is a desert for my money. And who cares about it? Nobody cares about it. Who's living their life according to the conceptions of modern philosophy? Nobody, as far as I can see. But yes, vitalism was this impulse in biology that persisted clear up until the 1920s with embryologists like Driesch and his school. And mechanical biology has been at great pains to suppress that. That's why Rupert Sheldrake is such a breath of fresh air, because he can be seen as a person carrying the vitalist message back into science. In his new book on the greening of science and nature is nothing more than a manifestation, a manifesto for the re-recognition of the presence of the world soul.
What about the Native Americans that were living that philosophy is what we like to know?
Yes, well, Aboriginal people, not only the Native Americans, but the tribes of the Amazon, if you live next to nature, this is such an overwhelming perception that it's never called into question. But you see, most of us traced our civilization to desert dwellers who invented agriculture, which gave us surpluses. So then we had to build walled enclosures to defend our surpluses from starving neighbors. And we're talking 6,000 BC at Jericho for this kind of stuff. And so we have been cut off from the natural mind longer than any other group of people on earth. This is how we are able to carry out the demonic, in the negative sense, the demonic reconstruction of the world that we have. I mean, what we have done is, if there is a sin, then we have sinned, Robert Oppenheimer said, beyond all rational argument, the physicists have known sin. And it's because they reached into the heart of matter without reverence. And their best trick was to call down the light that burns at the center of stars, and they call it down to the test centers of our deserts and onto the heads of our enemies, if necessary. But this is a cosmic sin. It's an abomination. It's the story of Western civilization. The first great error was the urbanization. Well, I don't know, first great error. The invention of agriculture was a pretty staggering bad turn. Then urbanization. And then a piece of bad luck that really we didn't need to have befall us, which was the invention of the phonetic alphabet. And with the invention of the phonetic alphabet, we moved away from symbolism and lost even the symbolic connection to the world. And that happened with the evolution of Demotic Greek and even earlier languages, linear A and B and that kind of stuff. McLuhan talks a lot about this. I mean, we live in a universe so alienated that we can barely conceive of the way back. But hopefully, archaeology is a wonderful thing. I mean, we are actually, as I said to you last night, digging into the stratigraphic layers of our past and reconstructing these ancient intellectual machines and setting their gears turning and seeing how it works. And hopefully, when we recover, we're like amnesiacs. We're like people who don't remember who we are or where we came from, and we just wander mumbling through the streets of our cities, foraging in garbage cans and frightening other people. And yet, if we could wake up, and archaeology and the rebirth of an awareness of the goddess and the pushing of science to the point where its irrational foundations become more clear. This is all part of a program of awakening, of an archaic revival that will then make us part of the living world rather than a disease, a parasitic force upon it. This refers to the theme I touched on a little bit last night of the importance of the imagination and how I think that our destiny lies in the imagination. God is ever existent and makes manifest all else, but he himself is hidden because he is ever existent. He manifests all things but is not manifested. He is not himself brought into being in images presented through our senses,
that's a little
but
better.
he presents all things to us in such images. It is only things which are brought into being that are presented through sense.
Mr.
Coming into being is
5
nothing
minutes left in
else
this
than
segment. I might do another
presentation
segment.
through
Let me think about it
sense.
for a second.
This is so thoroughly modern. It's just staggering. I mean, it's for 1,000 or 1,500 years, people couldn't say
It's gonna need
anything that
another
clear.
layer, but
It is
that's
evident then that
decidedly
he who
better.
alone has
There's
not
some more
come into
dimension.
being
I like the loose
cannot be
brush strokes
presented through
blending into
sense,
the linseed
and
oil.
that being so, he is hidden from
Translucency
our
is
sight.
nice. I'll
But
start
he
developing
presents
some very
all
good light
things to us
absorption
through
now.
our senses, and
Thinking.
thereby manifests himself through all things and in all things, and especially to those whom he wills to manifest himself. For though thought alone can see that which is hidden, inasmuch as thought itself is hidden from sight, and if even the thought which is within you is hidden from your sight, how can he, being in himself, be manifested to you through your bodily eyes? But if you have power to see with the eyes of the mind, then, my son, he will manifest himself to you. For the Lord manifests himself ungrudgingly through all the universe, and you can behold God's image with your eyes and lay hold on it with your hands. To my mind, this is the permission for the psychedelic experience, that we lay hold of the image of the ineffable through the eyes. If you wish to see him, think on the sun, think on the course of the moon, think on the order of the stars. The sun is the greatest of the gods in heaven. To him, as to their king and overlord, all the gods of heaven yield place. And yet this mighty God greater than earth and sea, submits to have smaller stars circling above him. Who is it then, my son, that he obeys with reverence and awe? Each of these stars, too, is confined by measured limits and has an appointed space to range in. Why do not all the stars in heaven run like and equal courses? Who is it that has assigned to each its place and marked out each for the extent of its course? And then it goes on and on. And then here is an amazing modern anticipation of modernity. Would that it were not possible for you to grow wings and soar into the air. Poised between earth and heaven, you might see the solid earth, the fluid sea, and the streaming rivers, the wandering air, the penetrating fire, the courses of the stars, and the swiftness of the movement with which heaven encompasses all. What happiness were that, my son, to see all these borne along with one impulse, and to behold him who is unmoved, moving in all that moves, and him who is hidden, made manifest through his works. This is an image of the planet seen from space. I mean, it's absolutely the unified image of our planet. And it is, I think, the central image in this early Hermetic thing. This is the unifying, this is as close to an image of what Godhead is that they were able to reach. I mean, this is a shamanic flight that delivers a scientific description of the Earth moving in space. This was written AD 150. This is Book 5. Nobody had that insight until we reached Giordano Bruno. And if you read Giordano Bruno in the Hermetic tradition, you know that Bruno was burnt at the stake. And the reason he was burned at the stake was because he looked up into the sky and did not see the stellar shells and the angelic hierarchies. Bruno had a mystical experience, and when it was over, he said, the universe is infinite. The stars go on forever. And that single statement was just the intellectual dynamite that destroyed the whole medieval, Hellenistic, the entire previous cosmological vision was left behind with that single statement. It was such a powerful statement that he had to go to the stake for that. And we have never recovered from that perception. It was a fundamental perception, and it occurred because he looked without precondition into the night sky.
Okay, well that about rounds out this clip, memory segment. So, let me wrap this up pretty quickly. That gets another layer, some nice light absorption, and a bit more depth to her face, and hair, and eyes. So that's it for the moment. Thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting contact.
On the foundation of all of this earlier thinking.
Have a good night, Earth.